decathlon Canada. Who is now the best athlete in the world, and he's Canadian. Pretty cool.
How did the other guy do from Canada? He was in third place.
He placed at fifth.
Oh,
he did well. That's fifth is good. That's his best ever.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Folks. I can confirm you are now live.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council meeting for Thursday, August the 5th, 2021. Sorry for a little delay in getting underway. We had a few technical difficulties, but we're now present and accounted for. So I'll do the roll call, starting with Councillor number 3, District 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here, ready to go. I have enjoyed the day this week. We actually are able to, here in the Eastern Passage area, getting their summer carnival going, and they've got a few events. So we did a big community cleanup today, some live music last night, and blessing of the fleet. So it's exciting here in this part of the district where I live.
Thank you. District 4.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here and looking forward to tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. District 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am here and ready to go.
Thank you. District 6.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and everyone. I'm all ready to go. Let's go.
Thank you. And Simon from the clerk, want to acknowledge yourself and who we have for staff tonight. We want to go through a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Simon Ross Siegel, the legislative assistant with Halifax Regional Municipality in the clerk's office.
We have from legal counsel tonight.
Josh Judah here. Good evening.
Thank you. Who we have from our planning department? We have. Go ahead, Maggie.
Good evening, councilors. Maggie Holm, principal planner with the Urban Enabled team, planning department.
All right, who else is present with your team?
Dean McDougall here, planner 2 with Maggie's team.
Okay.
And Megan Mond, planner 2 with Maggie's team as well.
All right, is that it for all our planning department? We have some other technical support people online with us tonight as well. Thank you very much for participating. So we'll get underway with our tonight's meeting. First of all, the approval of minutes of our last meeting on June 24th. May I have a motion to approve those, please?
I can move that, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Austin, second by Councillor Kent. Any question on the minutes before we call for the question on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes, all say aye.
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 Motion approved. Approval of the order of business for tonight or any additions or deletion. First of all, Mr. Clerk, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council, the clerk's office has not received any requests for additions or deletions as of this time.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just a question. I'm just looking at the public on the page. The Love Your Lake program is listed under 11.3 on the public online. We had that presentation last week, right? Is that just an error, or are we hearing from them tonight?
No, we're hearing from them tonight. They were on and they wanted to make a more fuller presentation. I believe that was the agenda for tonight.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Would you like them to go first before our public hearings, or you want to put them on hold?
I feel like we have the 2 public hearings booked, Mr. Chair, and members of the public that are planning to attend those, that we should do those first.
Yes, we are obligated by legislation to call them first. Yes. All right. Is there anything else to the agenda? We'll have a motion to approve them as circulated.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Austin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. No business arising from the minutes. Any declaration of conflict of interest tonight from anyone? Hearing none, we'll carry forward. No motions of reconsideration, no motions of rescission, no consideration deferred business, no table matters. So we'll go straight into our hearings. We have our first public hearing on item 10.1.1, case number 22487, development agreement for 112 and 114 Wise Road. May we have the staff come forward and make a presentation that will ask perhaps, do we want to put the motion on the agenda first and then have the presentation? How do you want to deal with this?
We usually do a presentation.
Presentation first, let's go. Okay. Thank you. Let's go ahead with the presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Community Council. My name is Dean McDougall, and I'll be presenting for the public hearing for case 22487, which is a development agreement application for 112 and 114 Wise Road in Dartmouth. Next slide, please. So the applicant is Fathom Studios on behalf of the property owner, and the location, as I mentioned, is 112, 114 Wise Road in Dartmouth. And the proposal is to allow for the construction of a 20-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial, office space, and approximately 160 residential units. Next slide, please. Great. Slide 3. So the subject site is located at the foot of the McDonald Bridge at the heart of the Wise Road Center. It's on the corner of Wise Road and Tuckett Avenue, adjacent to the Zatzman Sportsplex and the Halifax Transit Bridge Terminal, and it's across the street from the Esso gas station. Next slide, please. Here are some photos as the site looks today. So it's a one-story commercial building. Many probably know it formerly as the Scotiabank, but it's now home to President Law Office. Next slide, please. So planning policy outline. When a planning application is made, it's often enabled by the planning policies, meaning it was envisioned that development would happen here, and rules and guidelines are written to help shape what that development would look like. So planning and HRM consists of 3 levels of documents. It starts with the regional plan, which is very high level and identifies where population growth should occur and where investment into services like transit and pipe sewer and water should also occur. The next level is the community plan. So this is a focus on a specific geographic area, and it gets more detailed on what type of development should happen where. And often planning applications which require approval by council or community council are enabled in this plan. And so for this application, the applicable community plan is the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy, or the center plan, but was formerly the Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy, and I'll expand on that in just a minute. And following that, below that is the land use bylaw, and this is the most detailed planning document we have, and it outlines specific zoning and regulations that don't require special approval by council. So if you meet the rules, you can go get a permit and you don't have to engage with the public. Next slide, please. So a policy and bylaw overview specific to this site and this application. So the zone and designation for this site is the Center 2 zone under the center designation. And as I mentioned, the existing use is a 1-story office building. And the enabling policy, the policy that allows this application to be requested, is policy IP5 of the former Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy. And that is through policy 10.25 of the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy. So the policy it's a transition policy, 10.25. So this application was submitted prior to the center plan being in effect. And so a grandfather clause was written that allowed existing applications that were under review prior to the center plan being approved to continue as such. And there's a 2-year time limit on that. I'm sorry, could that slide go back one, please? I think it went ahead to slide, back to slide 6. Thank you. And so although the property is under center plan today, this application was being evaluated under the Dartmouth, former Dartmouth policies. That was in effect at the time the application was made. Next slide, please. In terms of the planning process, as you can see, we're in the final stages of the public hearing, highlighted in blue. And so any decision tonight can be appealed, and a permit cannot be issued unless the approval of the development agreement is confirmed. Next slide, please. So the agreement enables the development of a 20-story mixed-use building with a 4-story podium facing Wise Road and a 16-story residential tower. The proposal includes ground floor commercial space and office space above it, and approximately 160 residential units. So I won't speak too much into the design as the applicant will expand on those details in their presentation. Next slide, please. So policy consideration. The Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy requires all apartment buildings to go through a development agreement process. And so this policy requires council to consider the following in rendering their decision on a development agreement. So things like the height, the design and scale of the proposed building with respect to the compatibility of it with the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood, the adequacy of the controls placed on the development to reduce potential conflicts, landscaping and amenity space, and then also infrastructure capabilities. So can they handle the infrastructure? Can it handle this development? So things like sewer, water, roads, and transit are looked at. Next slide, please. Public engagement was held for this application, and the level of engagement completed was consultation achieved through a mail out notification, information sharing through our website, and an online survey. So the feedback from the community generally included the following. So the need to provide affordable housing was mentioned quite often by respondents. Wind concerns were also raised, traffic and access concerns, as both streets, as we all know, receive high volumes of traffic. And also said that it was a great location and provides much needed density in apartment units. In terms of the stats on the engagement, we had 514 notifications mailed out, 47 online surveys were received. And in terms of web page views, we had 1,611 unique web page hits. Next slide, please. So a summary of the key aspects of the proposed development. So height and massing. The maximum permitted height is 69 meters and a maximum tower footprint of 650 square meters. A minimum of 25% of the units are to be 2 or more bedrooms. There's a minimum of 1,334 square meters of amenity space, of which 844 must be outdoor space, so terraces. That equals to about 8.3 square meters per unit, and that doesn't include balconies. So balconies would be on top of that. And then lastly, a wind impact study was completed that identified 2 areas of concern, one being on the ground at the southwest corner of the building, near the corner of Wise and Nantucket, and the second being on the 5th floor terrace. So the development agreement requires that prior to the issuance of a permit, that the applicant must provide wind mitigation efforts at these 2 locations and a certification by a qualified professional that those wind mitigation efforts will achieve accepted industry standards for pedestrian wind comfort and safety for the intended uses of those 2 locations. Next slide, please. A non-substantive amendments. So a non-substantive amendment is a change to the agreement which could be made without a formal public hearing like we're having tonight. Instead, Community Council could authorize these changes by resolution. So as proposed, the non-substantive agreements within, or non-substantive amendments within this agreement include changes to the parking requirements and driveway access, changes to the Nantucket facade to accommodate any possible street improvements that HRM may do in the future on Nantucket Avenue, changes to the setbacks to accommodate Nova Scotia Power setback requirements, changes to the building design to allow the any wind mitigation efforts that were previously mentioned, and then changes to the building materials and changes to the commencement and completion dates in accordance with the limitations placed on it through the center plan. Next slide, please. So with that, staff recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated May 18th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or clarifications from member of council before we go to the presenter? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dean, for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about the wind piece about this, the wind mitigation. This is a very windy spot there with 99 Ys across the street. Maybe my memory is failing me, but I can't recall a development agreement. Isn't that usually something that's actually kind of wrapped up for us by this point, where there's a wind study done and council fully knows what we're getting on that? Whereas this one, it seems to be lumped in with non-substantive. Is this a timing thing, or like could you expand on what's happening there?
Sure, absolutely, Councillor. So through you, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Councillor. You're absolutely right. It is a time issue. So normally we would like to have all solutions wrapped up and provided to council for their decision on the development. But as I mentioned, this is an application that was grandfathered under the former rules. And in that transitioning policy in the center plan, they put a 2-year time limit on when the application had to get to community council for the decision on the application. Otherwise, it would be deemed refused. And this site has been quite tricky with the traffic. That also took some time in the analysis that ate up some time, and then the wind study too. So unfortunately, we were running out of time. And then as a solution, we identified the two areas that the wind study had. And luckily, the land use bylaw, center plan land use bylaw requirements around wind mitigation are in place. So we can defer to the land use bylaw regulations in that circumstance to have the wind mitigation looked at. And it's a prior to clause, so a development permit won't be issued for the building unless those two items are addressed. But again, yeah, it was a timing issue that didn't allow us to solve that before presenting it to you.
Okay, thank you for that. So the center plan, the conditions we have in there around wind, basically that's what we're going to apply for this development, even though it's not being approved under center plan. It's a development agreement process from pre-center plan.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel much better about this. Just looking at the design, I figured that the fact that it's on a podium on like 99 Wise across the street, which goes directly down the ground, should help the designer get to a place where that can actually be met satisfactory. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of any other councilors before we go to Councillor Kent, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Councillor Mancini as well in the chat. Would you like to go first, Tony? Are you okay with me going?
You go ahead first.
Okay. Thank you. So a couple of questions. When I look at the report and I'm looking at the I guess appendix is probably schedules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time figuring out, because I know there's been some suggestion that there might be a concern with if there was a fire emergency within the building and such, and I'm looking at it and I only see one location where it's residential entry. So those living in the building, surely I must be wrong, and maybe it's just not marked on these schedules. I see retail entries on a number of places. I'm looking at F and I can see residential entry, and D doesn't have any.
Would those questions be answered by a presenter that'll be coming up soon?
Well, staff certainly would have that answer.
Yes, Councillor. There are two exits proposed. They're not in the plans provided in the development agreement, as those details are worked out at permitting. We just want to focus on the design of the building, and so the interior layout is a little bit more flexibility provided at permitting, but it would be a requirement under the building code too to have the two exits as well. So they are proposed and provided for. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that stood out for me, and again, maybe I'm picking this apart too much, but the Wise Road study, it's from July 2013 to January 2021.
I'm sorry, Councillor, the Wise Road the traffic study?
In the report, case 22487, 112, it's in the blue. It would be right underneath your summary of responses. It's showing the email addresses.
Yes, okay. I understand now. I'm sorry. That is for the public engagement document.
So
Yes, so that is just a glitch. I don't know why on the survey program we use software that they picked that date as a start date, but the engagement didn't last for several years.
Well, and I was, seriously, even though that makes sense to me, and I figured that was the case, you never know. It might have been over the course of a few years with COVID, and I thought, okay, that's a really long time. Wow, this one's been on the books a long time. Well, I'm glad to hear that's just a glitch. Can you tell me a little bit more on the traffic study? Because that is a really, really dense area, of course. It is the funnel that leads to the bridge. So can you just give me a little summary of what what's been looked at there and why we think it's still okay.
Yes, absolutely. So the traffic impact study, access was the largest issue, not necessarily the amount of traffic put on the street by the proposed parking. I think 100 parking stalls are proposed, but the traffic study found that due to the strategic location of the development, right, being right adjacent to the bridge and also the transit hub, so active transportation and also transit, that there's a multimodal options that would be available. So the impact would be relatively low on the surrounding street network. The issue, however, really centered around access, so how cars were going to get in and out of the building, because a lot of the bridge traffic, people coming in and out. There's two intersections, signalized intersections, really close to each other, and also the bus-oriented transit lanes. We couldn't impede any traffic there. So the solution was the location where it's proposed, which is mid-block, and a right in, right out. That's pretty much the only option available for traffic. So it's a right in, right out. And at that location is the safest possible location for
And
it.
that's coming down Nantucket,
That's correct. Yeah.
correct? Yeah, turning, yeah. Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. That's it for me.
And Councilor Mancini.
I'm good, Mr. Chair. My question was around the wind study that Councilor Austin already brought up, so I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions of members of council before we go to the presenter, the applicant? We'll hear now from the applicant, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think you can hear me here. All right.
Yes, I can, sir.
Okay, I believe we have a presentation that has a summary of the entire thing that Dean's going to play. So, and then Chris Crawford's also available here, the architect on the team. So we'll be able to respond to questions after.
Okay. First of all, introduce yourself, Rob.
Oh, sorry. Rob LeBlanc with Fathom Studio. I'm the planner and landscape architect for this project.
Thank you.
Welcome to the development agreement for 112.
And who do we have presenting?
Road, Dartmouth.
I think this is Philippa in our office. It's just a recorded version.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there volume?
The audio must not be working.
Nantucket Avenue, a bustling future center neighborhood for Dartmouth. It is well connected with nearby amenities and a robust transportation network. It's soon to become the connective tissue of Dartmouth, joining downtown with the North End. It is a gateway to Dartmouth for people arriving via the McDonald Bridge. The site is zoned CEN2 in the center plan. The surrounding neighborhood is similarly zoned CEN2 and CEN1. These zones will be dense and vibrant. The maximum permitted FAR, or floor area ratio, is up to 8.0 or approximately 29 stories. The neighborhood also features the Dartmouth Common, including the Sportsplex, schools, and the bridge terminal, all within the PCF zones that are shown here. Wind data diagrams show the highest and most frequent wind speeds that may affect pedestrian comfort. A resulting wind shadow, shown here in pink from the proposed tower, shows street level comfort is most impacted in the spring, around 30% of the time. A 3 to 4 story podium will help mitigate the wind impact on pedestrian comfort. The sun is low and shadows are long in winter, spring, and fall. With wide streets and mostly low buildings, sun can reach this site even in the winter. The proposed tower will cast some shadows on the surrounding area, but the worst impacts on sidewalks and crosswalks will be mostly limited to winter mornings. Some new shade can be expected on Nantucket Avenue. This site is well served by all available modes of transportation. It's close to amenities and a short 10 to 15 minute walk to downtown Dartmouth. Next door is the city's best connected transit terminal, and it is in close proximity to the McDonald Bridge and access to Halifax. There are active transportation network improvements planned. A prominent corner, but not currently built with a pedestrian focus. To the north, other CEN1 and CEN2 zones may be developed in the future. To the south and to the east, the Dartmouth Common may remain undeveloped. The building fills the site except for a pedestrian plaza at the intersection. A flat iron form addresses the non-rectangular site boundary. Required tower setbacks and stepbacks are respected. A transportation reserve to the north naturally sets the building back. Shown here is the pro forma for the building. Amenity space exceeds the baseline requirements for a vibrant building community. There are abundant terraces and a public entry gallery. Shop fronts occupy the majority of the street at ground level. Articulated shop fronts along Nantucket Avenue are universally accessible with step floor slabs. Human-scaled masonry along the street wall, and the towers distinguished with dark metal cladding. Human-scaled brick masonry wraps the podium of the building. Dark metal and glass distinguish the tower above, as seen here. The flat iron form is a classic response to prominent corner sites. Curved masonry edges create interest on street walls with impressive detailing. Street wall materials are of a human scale. A rhythmic window grid contributes to an urban fabric. Covered arcades act as connectors between pedestrian zones. The Flatiron gestures towards the harbor, framing the intersection. There is a prominent shared entry at the Flatiron point. An arcade connects Wise Road with the transit terminal. Articulated and sheltered retail at ground level gives relief from the busy intersection. A rhythm of masonry and glass adds an urban fabric to the corner. Multiple shop fronts create interest and contribute to the public realm. Step slabs match grade and provide universal access to all shop fronts. A retail plaza at the rear provides a front door for those arriving via the transit terminal. Abundant amenities buffer the private and public realms of this building. Outdoor gathering offers views to the Dartmouth Commons and the neighborhoods beyond. These are rich amenities for all residents. The perimeter of the podium is occupied entirely by terraces. On this terrace, residents can enjoy views to the harbor and the Bedford Basin. A shared entry between office tenants and residential tenants acts as an amenity gallery for local artists. This space can open up to the parallel covered arcade outside. This acts as a buffer between a busy street and private residences. There is also a private lobby access from here. A beacon for people arriving from the McDonald Bridge. This building supports a street-level pedestrian environment, contributing to the creation of a complete community in this important node for the city. Thank you.
All right, so I think that's the presentation. Chris Crawford's available to answer questions on the building, and I'm available to answer questions on the wind study that was created, or and the microclimate study, or any of the other issues you might have.
All right, I'll ask if any members of council have any questions for you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask about the wind piece again. So looking at it seems like we're not starting from nothing here, right? Like, even though the approval of the wind piece is going to come after, it seems like some work has already been done. I'm wondering if the applicant can answer where they are with that particular part of this work. Like, is the study data that they presented, is that kind of the desktop thing? Is that actual wind model? Is it based on the current design, or was it just a massing model at the time? I'm just curious where we are actually in that process.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Yes, we have done a desktop study, so it's using a computational fluid dynamic model, ANSYS Discovery. It's using the latest version details of the building. And we compared existing conditions in the simulation with proposed conditions with the new building. And for the most part, we generally have a lot of areas where wind speeds have been reduced in the wind shadow of the building. And there's a number of areas that have increased wind speeds, in particular the corner of Nantucket and Wise, that corner. And using that data, the architects were able to make some modifications to the building to increase the height of the parapet on the 4th story, to cantilever some of the decks to reduce downdraft, and to introduce some additional articulation along Nantucket to reduce wind speeds from the prevailing northwesterly wind direction in the winter. So that study was provided back to the planning department in response to some of the changes to the building over the last year and a half.
Okay, so where the wind piece is not part of this, is the work basically at an end, or is there further mitigation that you folks are going to be pursuing and to get that that approval from the planning department?
Yeah, I'm not sure. This was provided back in May, and I'm not sure why it wasn't part of this package. But we worked with the planning department to, we had one version without modeling the existing conditions, and we were requested to simulate existing conditions and then compare and contrast the difference between the two. So in my estimation, I think we're done unless there's further requirement to move to a flume study.
Okay, thank you. I will come back to our planning department on that when we're at the end. That's the only question clarification I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kent is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. so the number one thing that we hear about as counselors, I think related to housing shortages and stuff are affordable housing. Wondering if you can have someone comment on what your plan is there. For affordability and how it compares to other residential dwellings such as this in the Dartmouth side.
Okay, I'm going to see if Chris is available to answer that question. If not, maybe the developers online that can respond to that one.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So, I mean,
please identify yourself for the record before Chris.
Sure. Yeah, this is Chris Crawford with Fathom Studio. I'm the project architect on this. You know, in designing this building and in speaking with the developer, I know there is an intention for this building to be targeted towards a more affordable market. I think this building being integrated into a major transit location and having very limited on-site parking available, and combined with the size of the units is leaning towards making these a more affordable option. But there's been no definitive direction, about a specific percentage of, above market or below market that this project would be. It's not really been a defined item. I think it's more driven by the location and market that this building is targeting. So yeah, I don't think that there's been a definitive answer from the developer on any specific target.
Thank you. And in the presentation, the slide was up and it was showing I believe the terrace area looked like a kitchen, outdoor kitchen, and on the podium. And part of that presentation spoke about public access. Can someone just give me a sense of within this building envelope, what would be on, I mean, obviously retail and businesses would have a layer of public access because people from the public might be utilizing those services. But other than that, is there something that is there that nets a kind of a new community space that is usable?
Yeah, that would be specifically that image showing that double height lobby space with the artwork. Because of the way that the lobbies work, the residential lobby is beyond that space. So that is essentially something that the public would have access to either enter into retail or into the commercial office lobby. So that and that arcade space would be a public space that would be accessible. The roof terraces are for residents of the building and are not intended to be a public amenity.
Okay, and would those be that pedway kind of environment with the art gallery? Would those be open only a limited number of hours, or are they going to be 24-hour? Because
it wouldn't be open 24 hours. No, I think it would be integrated into the kind of retail and office operation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation, folks. In your presentation, you talked about how the area is not really a greater pedestrian experience, and the challenge with that area is there's a lot of cement and asphalt and steel. In your pictures that you showed and your drawings, you showed a little bit of landscaping, a few trees and some lawn. Is there any plans to really enhance that landscaping so that we can try to enhance that pedestrian experience? I mean, I like the fact that there is commercial on the ground floor, but is there any public space that people can have their coffee, hang out, wait there while they're waiting for the bus or wherever else they're going? Is there any plans to add to that experience?
Yeah, I can. Go ahead, Rob. You can take.
No, sorry, I was just going to say there is a commercial terrace at the corner of Nantucket and Wise Road, quite an extensive one that the building has been set back from that property line. And in addition, the building at ground level has been set back in to provide kind of canopied area in and under that. There's, I believe, over 20 new trees that are being proposed, especially in the area where we know wind is going to be an issue.
Right.
And a lot of landscaped area. But generally speaking, I think the developer has been really keen to possibly do as much kind of landscape design beyond his own property boundary, but that would need to work with HRM, because HRM owns quite a large corner here, and it's part of a transportation reserve. So I think he'd be very open to additional landscaping if HRM is fine with that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Rob, and I'm interested in Councillor Austin's opinion on that too, because I think there's an opportunity to put a nice building in there on that corner with the curved entrance, but that pedestrian experience is lacking in that area, and that green space and landscaping, I think, will be welcomed by most. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other further questions from members of the council? Hearing none, we'll go now to the public hearing. To be a part of this public hearing process, you had to register as of 4:30 yesterday to be a participant in tonight's hearing. I believe we have no registered speakers for tonight's hearing. So let's go to the motion. May someone put the motion on the floor for debate, please?
I move we close public hearing, Mr. Chair.
Close public hearing. All those in seconder?
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Motion, please.
I'd like to put that on the floor, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, oops, and as soon as I move the window here, here we go. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as said on attachment A, and 2, require the agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Second by Mancini.
Mancini. Other further questions or debate on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on this project, I'm satisfied with what's been presented to us. My main concern around it has been the wind piece of it. Anyone who's walked across the bridge or ridden across or just walked along Wise Road around this spot knows the experience of the wind gust being up there at the top of the hill and having a very tall building across the street that has design elements that didn't think about wind at all. I mean, 99 Wise Road is a sheer wall right down to the sidewalk without a podium, which means that every bit of wind that goes around 99 Wise, the downwash is being directed right down to the street. And so that's why we have such an extreme wind situation around that building, kind of a little bit of the Maritime Center in Dartmouth, so to speak. I just looking at the design of this, I don't expect that we will have the same sort of result with this because it's a very different design. It's been built with that sort of thing in mind, and with the large podium on it. So I'm reasonably confident that my biggest worry on this will be satisfied through the work of the planning department and the developer. In terms of the neighborhood, it's an interesting spot. When the center plan, the first kind of attempt at the center plan, the so-called avenues piece that they tried to roll out in 2012, which was basically what became package A, trying to get out there and get some modern planning rules in place for the places that we wanted growth. It generated a negative reaction in this neighborhood in particular, with concern about more large buildings on Wise Road. And I think a lot of that was because there wasn't a bigger sort of picture done at that point. We hadn't been through the center plan process to visualize and plan for, well, where do we want density in our community and where do we not want density in our community? Because there's a trade-off to be had. And the result of the center plan is this site is one of the places that we expect density on. This is a spot that's zone center. It's one of the highest density zones you can get. It has a high FAR. We're assessing this not under the center plan directly, but I mean, I think the center plan is relevant towards what's happened in terms of the community. The feedback on this one this time around has been nothing compared to what it was in 2012 when there was such a negative reaction to the avenues plan. And I think that is because we as a community have gone through this process of identifying where the spots are that are good for growth, and this is one of them. So I am happy to support this. The only question I just wanted to ask planning, where the applicant did present some wind modeling, wind data, whether or not we're basically at the final hurdle there, or whether they still have review to do of the applicant's piece.
Answer from staff on that question, please.
Yes. Excuse me. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. There, as written in the staff report, and as Mr. Rob Levant alluded to, there's two problematic areas that were identified in the study that in extreme weather wind events, they would potentially have winds that would exceed what are considered accepted industry standards for pedestrian wind and comfort. So we flagged those two locations in the agreement and are requiring that mitigation efforts be provided at permitting before permits issued to show that those winds are going to be reduced through things like landscaping and other options available. So and that needs to be certified by a qualified professional. And so if further studies need to be done to certify that, then they will have to be done for a permit to be issued.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, that's the wind piece has been the only one that I've kind of been a little leery on this one. The location's great for more density. So I would urge my colleagues to support the staff recommendation on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Mancini, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, no question. I agree that it's nice to see something happen in this corner. It's been in that condition for a long, long time. The density is definitely needed. The units are definitely needed. No secret in HRM that we know you need the units. Nice to see them on the Dartmouth side. I like the look of the building, the curved entrance. Happy with the ground, to see the commercial on the ground floor and the offices above that. As I mentioned earlier in my question of clarification, the landscape in the green, I think, is extremely important. And I hear that not only for the pedestrian experience, but it's also going to be helpful for the winds. I hope that the developer and our staff are to get together and expand upon that. I'd like to see in the gallery for the local artists. I think that's really important, especially in Dartmouth. We really haven't had anything, the major things that have happened in that area have been the bus terminal, the sportsplex. Now we have the splash pad that far, but seeing a building with residential is fantastic. So I'll be supporting this, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other comments from the members of council. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo some of what Councillor Mancini has put forward. This building is impressive, and what I like about it is that it is a significant investment in the Dartmouth North area, and I think that not a lot has gone on there. There have been government initiatives, certainly as Councillor Mancini has spoken of, but this kind of private investment, I think, is overdue. It's a well-established community, but I've used this word before. To me, this is a bold investment. This is exciting, I think, and can really I think add benefits to the area beyond just the housing layer. I'm particularly impressed with the green roofing and the green podium things that are incorporated into that. I look forward to seeing what that comes about. The outdoor kitchen, but in particular, as Councillor Mancini noted, the gallery. Often when I have ever had opportunity to speak with developers who want to put something within a district or area that are represented, it's always a question that I have is that, okay, I can see where you're going to benefit, can see where those who are going to live there benefit. What does the greater community benefit by? And I think there's a number of things here, but the gallery is exciting. Dartmouth has had a long history of supporting our creative artists in many ways, and this is just is to me a good fit. And the ability to tap into this area that has so access to so many things, jobs, the transit, the parks, the schools are there, the commons, services and businesses. This is a win to me. Yes, it's a large building. It's a big change, I think, for that area. But if that change is going to come, which I think is a positive for the municipality, this is the right location. This is the right place for that. So I will be supporting it. And we know there will be residents who will find difficulty with it, but in the long run, I think this is the right thing. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Purdy, please. Councillor Purdy.
It's Mr. Chair. Yep. Thank you. Thanks. I just wanted to chime in as well, kind of echoing Councillor Kent's comments and everyone else's. And my couple concerns were addressed by the questions that have already been answered. And I just want to say that I think this is a beautiful building. It is creative, innovative for that small parcel of land. And I think it's going to be a great addition to Dartmouth, and all of the little touches that's going to make it very special. So just wanted to add that. Thanks. I'm very happy to support this.
Councillor Austin for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the point that Councillor Mancini is making about the public realm down at that corner. It is very much an important corner in the city, and will hopefully be much more pedestrian focused in the future. We're at our timing is a little off right now. The applicant, of course, they want to get moving with their project, but Wise Road is in a bit of a holding pattern. We are doing the bike lane pieces there, but the bike lanes that are going in are also designed in such a way as to be adaptable to change. We're not going necessarily all in the way we would have if we thought the street was final. And all this is going to the work that you would know, Mr. Chair, from the Bridge Commission, which is the toll plaza is likely on its way out. When the Bridge Commission goes to electronic tolling, that intersection will get entirely redesigned, because a lot of the asphalt, a lot of the space that's dedicated in there is all about queuing cars for the tolling station. And if the tolls aren't there anymore, it'll involve a considerable redesign. And I had talked to staff about, well, maybe we can give up some of our lane space here and coordinate our own sort of public realm improvements in this area, so to better mesh with what the building developer is going to be doing anyway. But until we really have that intersection piece sorted out, staff aren't in the opinion that we can let anything go just quite yet. But I'm fairly confident that in the future, this whole kind of area can be changed considerably to be much more people friendly, rather than just all about moving cars as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I'd like to make a couple comments on the application before we call for the vote. I concur with your comments in regards to the Bridge Plaza area, in regards to the access to and from the bridge. Hopefully a future roundabout will only be there to make it a lot easier to get access to and from the bridge. But the only thing I was disappointed is the most aesthetic feature of this building is not facing the bridge. It's facing the Doubletree Hotel. And that's a disappointment, because it has to situate itself on the configuration of the lot. It's just disappointing that curved flat iron triangular corner could not be facing the bridge instead of facing the hotel. But that's because of the configuration of the lot itself. But that feature is going to be an iconic building for the downtown Dartmouth, and I look forward to the day when it opens. So I'll call for the question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move to the second item of the agenda, which is item 10.1.2, case number 22491, development agreement for 46 Maple Street in Dartmouth. We have a presentation, please.
Thank you. Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and councillors. Simon, are you going to put up the presentation, or I can do it? I just noticed that you did it for Dean's.
Thank you. I will just be putting up now.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So good evening, Mr. Chair and councillors. My name is Megan Mond, and I am the planner with the HRM Planning Applications Group that's here to present tonight for the public hearing for case 22491, which is an application for a development agreement for the lands at the corner of Thistle Street and Maple Street in Dartmouth. So now I am on slide 2. So the applicant for this proposal is ZAP, and they have asked to enter into a development agreement for a 20-unit stacked townhouse development at 46 Maple Street in Dartmouth. Next slide, please. So 46 Maple Street is located at the northeast corner of Thistle and Maple Street, outlined in red on the image on the right. Brightwood Golf Course and Country Club is to the north of the site, and Sullivan's Pond is a few blocks to the east. The site is in a low-density residential neighborhood comprised of primarily single and 2-unit dwellings. Next slide, please. So the site has been used as a vehicle storage space, but it's currently vacant. So the image on the left shows the site as seen from Thistle Street, and then the image on the right is the view of the site from Maple Street. So you can get a sense of the steep grade change that is on the site by looking at you're looking at the roof of the building when you're on Thistle, and then when you're on Maple Street, you can see the bottom of the building there. Next slide, please. So Dean already went over this, but I will briefly touch base a bit in terms of the context for this application. So there are 3 levels of planning documents in HRM. The highest level is the regional plan, and it guides where population growth and investment of services like transit, piped water, and sewer should occur. The second level is the community plans, and community plans focus on a specific geographic area and outline where and how different types of development should occur. So often planning applications that require council approval are enabled through the community plans. And so this application is enabled by the Regional Center Secondary Planning Strategy, which is also known as Center Plan, but it was previously subject to the Downtown Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy. And I'll get into more details about why I'm noting both of those strategies on the next slide. And then the third and most detailed planning document is the Land Use Bylaw, and the Land Use Bylaw identifies the zoning for the land and specifies regulations for developing a property. So any development that can meet the land use bylaw regulations can happen without council approval and without public engagement. Next slide, please. So the site is zoned HR1, which is the higher order residential 1 zone of the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw. And it's designated higher order residential under the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy. So policy 10.25 of the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy allows for applications that were on file prior to council giving notice of its intent to consider the adoption of the Regional Center documents to continue to be considered under the existing policies in effect on the date of the notice. So as this application was on file before the notice of the intent to adopt the Regional Center documents, it is being considered under the policies of the Downtown Dartmouth Municipal Planning Strategy. Specifically policy N5, which identified the site as an opportunity site for increased density. And as I mentioned, the site is currently vacant, but it had been previously used for vehicle storage. Next slide, please. So similar to the last application that we just spoke about, this application is also in its final stages. So following the public hearing, council will make a decision about the application, and then any decision that is made can be appealed, and then permits can only be issued once the development agreement is registered on title. Next slide, please. So the proposed development agreement enables a 20-unit stacked townhouse development. 16 of these units front on Thistle Street, and then 4 of these units front along Maple Street. So there are 18 parking spaces on the site, including 1 accessible parking space, and access to the parking area is via the existing driveway on Maple Street. And the driveway will be designed as a right in, right out. So also on the site is fully screened garbage enclosures, which are at the north end of the site. And then landscaping is proposed in the hatched areas, which are a little tricky probably to see on the screen there. They are around the parking lot and around buildings. And there is a combination of fencing and landscaping along the property lines to screen that parking area from the surrounding residential uses. And the outdoor amenity space totals 55 square meters. Next slide, please. So the first two elevations here show what's labeled as Building A, which is the building with the 16 units fronting along Thistle Street. So the image on the top is the north view, which would be the view that you would see along Thistle Street. And then the image in the middle there, that would be the elevation that faces the interior parking area. And then the three images along the bottom show Building B, which is the 4-unit building facing Maple Street. And the buildings are both 3 stories, stacked townhouse development with dormer windows and clapboard siding, which is in response to the low density built form that already exists in the surrounding community. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the new regional center secondary municipal planning strategy has transition policies. Policy 10.25 that allows applications that were on file prior to the plan's adoption to continue under the policies in effect at the time. And then policy 10.26, which requires applications considered under policy 10.25 to include commencement dates not exceeding 3 years and completion dates not exceeding 6 years. So then policy N5 of the downtown Dartmouth municipal planning strategy. So that has since been deleted, but was in the active policy when this file was submitted. So that's the enabling policy for that site. And this policy identifies the subject site as an opportunity site for increased residential density. Development may be considered through a development agreement. And the policy requires that council consider the following in rendering their decision about a development agreement. So that 25% of the units are geared towards family. So in this case, 25% of the units must be 3 bedrooms. The residential density may be 35 units per acre with an additional 5 units per acre where possible, where the site has unique conditions. So in this case, it was determined the site does have unique conditions in terms of the grade changes, and it is reasonable to consider additional density to encourage the replacement of the existing overflow vehicle storage with housing. And furthermore, the form that they have proposed is compatible with the surrounding area and does integrate well into the community. Council must also consider external appearance of the building, that it reflects the traditional character, buffers and screening from single unit dwellings, landscaping, amenity space, that the parking is located to reduce the visual impact from the street and traffic circulation. Next slide, please. So policy D1 of the downtown Dartmouth municipal planning strategy also provides urban design criteria for council to consider for the development agreement, including the scale, massing, and grain, provision of consistent street edge, that the building complements adjacent buildings in terms of height, materials, rhythm, color, and proportion, that it is pedestrian oriented, and there is pedestrian street level activation. So this proposal would be 3 stories and contextually fits within the surrounding area. And the proposed height measured from Thistle Street is 23.6 feet to the roof line and 35.6 feet to the peak. So that's in keeping with the surrounding buildings. And the townhomes are articulated vertically with windows, materials, and roof lines that help break up the building's massing and break it up in a manner that is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And the building facade does provide a consistent street edge, and parking is located in the rear yard. And then traditional clapboard siding is proposed with a design that is complementary to adjacent buildings. And as the site is designed with grade-related residential units, that does bring activity to the street level. Next slide, please. So the level of engagement that was completed was consultation achieved through a mail-out notification. There was also the project website on halifax.ca, as well as signs on the property. And 274 notification letters were mailed to residents, and we heard from 22 people. And the webpage had 871 unique views between January 1st, 2020 and May 26th, 2021. And the feedback that we received included concerns about traffic, concerns about the location of the driveways, concerns about stormwater management, and concerns about the impact on nearby trees. So in response to the traffic and the access to the site, so due to the challenging grade on the site, access from Thistle Street was explored, but it was determined that it was unworkable with this built form. And then to avoid vehicles queuing onto Maple Street, the solution was to have a right in, right out driveway access. So the new residents may have some challenges coming in and out to the parking area, but it would not affect the existing users and the road network in any way. Next slide, please. So in terms of stormwater, that was mentioned as one of the issues. So stormwater management. So stormwater is piped from the Brightwood Golf Course across the street into the retention pond in the lot immediately north of the subject site. So Halifax Water is undertaking work to respond to the flooding issues in this area, and they're working to pipe that stormwater into the street rather than across this site. And so then once that rerouting is completed, which may happen this summer, then the easement on the subject site could be extinguished. But as long as that easement is in place, no permanent structures are permitted on that easement area. Next slide, please. So to summarize, 20 residential units in a double stack townhouse style building are being proposed, and at least 25% of the units must have a minimum of 3 bedrooms. 18 parking spaces, including 1 accessible space, will be provided. 55 square meters of common outdoor amenity space will be provided. And the proposal includes providing screening and a landscape buffer around the northern and eastern property lines. Next slide, please. A non-substantive amendment is a change to an agreement which could be made without a formal public hearing. So instead, Community Council could authorize this change by resolution. The proposed development agreement has 2 items that can be considered non-substantive. So that would be an extension to the commencement date and an extension to the completion date. Next slide, please. So staff do have a positive recommendation. Staff recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated June 8th, 2021. Next slide, please. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Megan. I believe Councillor Austin has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Megan, for the presentation. So the bulk of the feedback I've received from the neighborhood on this one has been focused around the traffic piece. And so I have a couple of questions I just want to clarify on that. One of the questions has been, well, why can't they just come in off of Thistle rather than Maple? And I get the sense that that is an elevation design piece to the whole thing?
Yes, you're correct. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the grade of the site is quite steep, and so it drops significantly from Thistle Street as you transition down Maple Street. So when public engagement happened, that was voiced as a concern, and so the applicant did explore that. And due to the grade of the site, that made it very challenging, and then keeping this built form further made it more challenging. So it wasn't possible to have this style of built form with access from Thistle Street. And then also keeping in mind the easements around the back of the property there. They're still there, and currently the Halifax Water wouldn't permit any permanent structures on those easements. So you couldn't move the building further back. And then you would also be taking away that street level activity around Thistle.
Okay, thank you for that. So what sort of review do we do of the traffic? Because I mean, the traffic piece is prepared by the applicant. What does the HRM review of that look like?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So the traffic impact statement would have been reviewed by our development engineering group, and they would also the traffic services group would also be taking a look at that likely. So they would review that to make sure that it's meeting all the specifications that they want to see in a traffic impact statement, and making sure that their findings align with that they seem reasonable.
Okay, thank you for that. I did note in the thing that in the report that they went with a conservative starting point in terms of assuming trip generation. The last question I had just on this, the write in, write out dynamic there. What do you have any sense? And this is probably more of a design engineering question. What that will look like in practice, right? What I'm wondering is. We can sign that you can't turn left here, but what will the physical barrier look like down there to make sure, or to try and make sure that people aren't just turning left out of there anyway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. That's a good question. I don't have all of the details on that, but based on what I know of this file and the access that's shown on the site plan, it does look like it would be that median style where it makes it very tricky to turn your car left when you're in the narrow spot that's putting you in a trajectory to turn right. The applicant may be able to speak with that, but I also suspect that that's something that will have to be sorted out at permitting stage with our development engineering group.
I kind of suspected that was the case given the location. Thank you for that. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Councillor Kent, please.
Thank you. Quick question. Something was brought forward in a written submission that tweaked my interest, which was probably a historical use of an ironworks. And the question was around environmental assessment. Now, and I don't know how long ago that was there, at that time, there may not have been a requirement for any remediation and such. So is this something that's on the radar and already addressed, or is there potential that once they get going, they might find potentially even historical pieces?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Yes, so I did see that correspondence and did some digging into that today. We have old fire insurance plans, and it turns out the site did used to be an old iron foundry, and that was back in the 1960s. Likely ceased operation at the latest by 1964. And so I can't speak to what's happened on the site in terms of if there had been any remediation after that, but any environmental impact assessments that need to be done do fall within the province's jurisdiction. That's something that I'm not sure if the applicant has looked into. I did reach out to them earlier today, but it was quite a last minute thing, so they may be able to speak to what they've done with the site so far, if anything, but the onus is on the property owner to do their own due diligence to make sure that the site is safe. And I will also note that there is a catch-all clause in our development agreements that does require the developer to make sure that they are complying with all provincial legislation and regulations.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave that question for the applicant. Thanks.
Councillor Purdy next.
Thank you. My question had to do with the amenity space on the property. And I was just wondering, as 25% of the units are geared to families, is that enough space? It seems like a very small piece. If there's going to be kids there, would there be maybe this is for the developers, play structure, anything required if there are children, family?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I will take a stab at that, and if the applicant wants to add on, I'll let them do that. But 55 square meters is what is required. It is quite a tight site once you have that configuration of the townhouses and the parking spaces for them. I will note that the site is in an urban area, and a couple blocks away there are the two schools with playgrounds there, and then down the road on Tulip there is another playground. The development agreement itself gives the option of having it as play structures or just general amenity space, so I think that would be something that would be worked out in more detail at the permitting stage when they finalize those building configurations.
Thank you.
Are there any more further questions from any members of council before we go to the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll go forward to the public hearing now. As stated earlier, you had to register a bit by 4:30 yesterday to sign up for any potential opportunity to speak on this matter. We have 2 people who signed up for tonight's meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
doesn't the applicant get a chance at this
Oh,
point?
oh, yes. Getting ahead of myself. Sorry. Yes, the applicant has an opportunity to make a presentation. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I just need to know, are we in the public hearing yet, or can I let my
No.
puppy out?
No,
Okay.
well, you'll have an opportunity to question the applicant when the applicant's done the presentation.
Yeah, I just need to let my dogs out, so I need.
And then turn your video on. We have the applicants coming forward. I think we have Joe there.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Councilors. This is Joe Zareski. I'm an architect and partner at ZAP, and I'm with my colleague Chris Mercedes, urban planner, and also with ZAP. We're pleased to present the development agreement for the corner of Maple and Thistle Street this evening. I guess I'd like to start off by saying we're very pleased to represent the O'Regan's family, a well-known family in the Dartmouth area who've owned this property, I would guess, as early as when the foundry probably stopped in the early 70s would be my guess. I know my parents bought a car on this lot back in the mid 80s, and walked past the site many times when it was an active car dealership during that time. In recent years, it was being used as a temporary holding yard for the O'Regan's automotive group operations as cars are transferred to various sites around the city. And lately, with the opening of their Wilkinson Drive facility, this property has been surplus. So I guess one of the points that I wanted to make in saying that is traditionally, this site has seen upwards of 50, 60 odd cars coming and going from this site. And I think what we're proposing here is much more in keeping use as far as traffic flows than had been previously used on the property in recent years. So the site is, as Megan quite aptly pointed out, is at the top of Maple Street at the Thistle intersection. If you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, that would be great. This was the original site plan application that was made sometime late last year. You'll see here the 20 odd units stacked townhouse format, which I'll talk about in a second, but also the driveway cut. And our rationale in consolidating the cars in the back, and you'll see the easement running around the corner of the site. That was right off the bat an area that we knew that we could not put a building. So putting the building towards the street made a lot of sense from the current sort of context of this site, but also the pedestrian realm, and trying to mitigate the amount of driveway cuts that you would otherwise get, for instance, along Thistle Street. So if you can imagine a series of townhouses along Thistle Street with their own individual driveways, you can imagine that experience along Thistle Street would change drastically from what I think is being proposed. Furthermore, on Thistle Street on that side, there is a bus station, a bus stand, and conflicting with that was seen as being not very desirable. So using the driveway cut, or very close to where the existing driveway cut, seemed like a logical approach to providing some surface parking for a more modest residential development. If I could go to the next slide, please. So what we heard after making this initial application was this driveway access and the intersection of Maple Street and Thistle Street, the stormwater management, as Megan pointed out, and some concern regarding an existing tree buffer along the eastern property line. So we go to the next slide, please. So in response, we made some changes to the access means to the site, and you can see a median to help separate the right in, right out requirement. So it's going to be very difficult to make a left-hand turn given the shape and the curb cuts that we are proposing. And I'll just also speak briefly about the grade change between Thistle Street and the parking lot. It's upwards of 10 or 12 feet because of the retaining wall that's there. And in putting in a ramp, it would essentially chew up quite a bit more space than what is currently contemplated for a driveway access if we were to come off Thistle Street. The other thing that using the driveway cut where it is, it allows us to put a smaller scale part of the development. You can see unit 9 and 10 to help transition the project towards some of the smaller scale properties along Maple Street. I go to the next slide, please. So how we responded was the right-in, right-out driveway access, as had been mentioned. And in consultation with Halifax Water, we understood, and in fact, I think the activity is underway, that they are in the process of redesigning and implementing a different stormwater management plan and in using the street right away as opposed to an easement across the property. And we understand that this solution should solve some of the neighbors' concerns. And then lastly, the agreement does require us to add a landscape buffer and improve the opacity of the fencing and retain as much as reasonably possible as we can some of the existing trees that were planted by the Regan's family actually back in the 80s. The next slide, please. So these elevations I think were shown by Megan, but I'm going to get you to advance these a little bit more because we have some renderings here that might be a little easier to understand. Next slide. And as mentioned, there is quite a grade change between Thistle and the property itself. And we're taking advantage of that grade change by introducing the stacked townhouse typology. And we feel that this is the best response for the community, given the 2 or 2.5 story buildings that make up a majority of the housing options in the neighborhood. And so we feel that this typology actually is more geared towards a family unit. And the options that renters are going to have here are more than meets the eye, I would say. So this 3-story building is a 2-story house for all intents and purposes on the upper 2 floors, which have optional 2 or 3 bedroom layouts. And so depending on market conditions, we are going to be able to get a large bedroom count on the upper level unit. The lower level unit, which is a single story, is a 1 bedroom. And the way the stairwells are designed within each townhouse, if a tenant so chooses to rent all 3 floors, they could put, let's say, a student in the basement of their own family, of course, or an aged parent or someone like that, so they could rent the whole townhouse if they wanted to. So there's a lot of flexibility in how this is designed, and it's definitely driven by the topography of the site. If I could take to the next slide, please. So this is a rendering of the project from the corner of Maple and Thistle Street. And you'll see in this view, with the exception of the motorcyclist and the white SUV coming out of the driveway, there are no cars coming and going from Thistle Street. And we felt this was the best response for that neighborhood across the street, in that we're picking up the vernacular of gabled roofs, dormers, shed dormers, clapboard siding, and variation in materials to emulate the scale and character of that part of Dartmouth. Next slide, please. This is the view looking up Thistle Street, and you can see this is a fairly steep site. This is actually modeled with the same slopes as the survey has been given to us. And you'll notice that white SUV is sort of pulling right, and you'll see a little green island in the middle there. That is how this right-in, right-out driveway is going to work. And the placement of that driveway actually helps us with the length of townhouses running along Thistle, because it gives us enough space between that building and the 4-unit building that's in the foreground here. So now we have lots of access to light for that unit and space between the 2 buildings, so that that end unit on the corner of Thistle and Maple actually has access to light and views towards downtown Dartmouth. Next slide, please, or I think this might be the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. Thank you. The other thing about the amenity space, I think that was raised a little bit earlier. I will point out that we are about a block or 2 away from both By High and Dartmouth High Schools, both of which have playgrounds. We do have a small space that we do intend to use for amenity, and each one of the units has its own external deck that the tenants will be able to have access to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Mancini had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe and Chris, thank you very much. Good to see you guys again. Three questions. One, I'm trying to understand the right in and the right out piece. So if I'm living there and I'm traveling down Thistle, I'm coming over, maybe I'm working in Halifax and I'm coming down Thistle. So isn't the right in and right out on Maple going to force people to go down streets like Pine Street, then across the Rose to get into to access their property? Can you explain that to me?
Councillor, I live in the neighborhood myself, and you have lots of options to get through to Maple Street. I live over towards the Creighton Park area.
Yes.
Many times I will take the bridge down to Ochterlony Street and drive up Ochterlony Street, and then you'll be able to turn right up to Maple. I think if it's mandated that you can only turn right in and right out, I think the tenants will develop their own driving patterns to access their site, and will take, if they're coming from the bridge, and we don't know if they're coming from the bridge or coming from Burnside or coming from Woodside, that they will have to develop a pattern of taking the routes that are defined as major thoroughfares in the city to get to the bottom of Maple Street and come back up. And that would typically be Ochterlony, Prince Albert, and those methods.
I'd be curious to hear from Councillor Austin. Obviously, he lives in the area, very close to this property, and how he feels that the travel, if forced to do the right in, right out, or how that's going to impact it. So thanks for that. I noticed in your pictures, and thank you for the pictures, really help better than the drawings, but I saw steps. What about accessibility then?
Yep. So, Councillor, as you know, the code requires us to have barrier-free units for any development that has more than 4 and or above 20 a part thereof. So we're at 20. We have at least one. The barrier-free units are on the ground floor. Okay. Not every unit on the ground floor has steps. The ones that are on Maple Street and the ones that are we're using the grade to our advantage, we can actually access those suites on the lower level unit, not the upper level units. So we can meet and if not beat the barrier-free requirements of the code.
And I love hearing you say beat them, and we should be trying to beat them all the time, improve them. Thank you. That my last question is, you alluded in your presentation about the owners of this property, the Reagans, and this is a special, property in relationship to the Reagans. I think with the original car dealership. Is there any plans to do something to acknowledge that historical feature to the Reagans family? Because the Reagans family have been, great ambassadors for our community, and so is there any plans to do something special so it's acknowledged in that way?
Not to my knowledge, Councillor. I think, there's still a lot of work to be done as far as branding this development and understanding, how it's going to be presented in the marketplace. I think there's going to be an opportunity for something along those lines with that. I think, the Reagans, as you know, don't like to toot their own horns. They are great stewards of the community. And I think what they want to see here is leave a legacy that their family would be proud of, and do it in quality as opposed to quantity. And I think this development represents that. We're not trying to put in a large apartment building here. We're being very conscious about the context and the character of the neighborhood.
And speaking of that, last item, Joe, is there any discussions with the Reagans with regard to the affordability piece? I mean, it always came up in the last presentation, and it's going to come up in every presentation afterwards. Is there any thought or any understanding of trying to make at least some of these older units affordable?
I think that's always in the back of the Reagans' mind is, how do we help affordability in Dartmouth? I think the format that we have here, where it's an optional sort of 1-bedroom basement level or a 2-bedroom upstairs or a whole thing being one large unit. I mean, the more bedrooms you have, if you have roommates or if you have an extended family, it's going to be more affordable just from that nature. It's not just all 1-bedrooms.
Nope.
So if you think of it in those terms, the more bedrooms you have and the more options you have to fit more people in the unit, that sort of promotes the affordability factor, because you've got efficiencies with the number of kitchens and bathrooms, so to speak. So I think that format, I think, is one that does lend itself well to affordability standpoint.
Okay, thank you. I'd be very curious to Councillor Austin, when you speak, whether it's clarifying or during debate, your thoughts on the right in and the right out with regard to how people access this building. Guys, thanks for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Councillor Kent, please. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mancini, for touching on the affordability. I wonder, though, if you could maybe offer comment on behalf of the applicants around my questions related to the ironworks that were there. Is there your sense with the O'Regans that should they come across something that is of significant historically to whatever local area? I mean, we know we have other properties that are older and perhaps more likely, but you just never know. You know, the original businesses that are scattered throughout the Dartmouth side and such are still important to us, as evident in the skate factory, the old I forget the name of it down there on Acreley, so or Alderby. No, Alderby, yeah. So I wonder if you could comment on that, and if there is plans to you know, acknowledge that and not just bulldoze through it, right?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, so the news about the foundry is fairly new for us. It was just a couple of days ago, so we haven't had a really good chance to dig right into it. But I mean, the requirements for archaeological study or environmental impact statement are provincial, and we intend to follow any provincial guidance that is there, and any permits that are required will be obtained at the building permit stage.
But with respect, I think, Councillor, to the history of the site, that's also very important to us. And I know that the O'Regans, if they were to discover something of significance, that should make its way, I think, maybe back to the city as something that should be on display, then that would certainly be considered. I don't think there's an opportunity that we're looking at to feature it necessarily on the site. I guess it would depend on what that is. But certainly, if there's any environmental issues that would jeopardize the safety of anyone living there, the province kind of sets the rules around that, and mitigation would have to happen. And I think I could tell you fairly confidently that it's probably a clean site, and if it's not, they will be made clean.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions of any members of council before we go to the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll go to the public hearing now. As mentioned earlier, you had to register as of yesterday, 4:30, to participate in this public hearing. We have two citizens who signed up. We have Ann Norton and Bill McLeod. Is Ann and Bill on the line with us tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Simon, the clerk. This is just to note that we have reached out to Bill McLeod and have not succeeded in connecting with him regarding confirming whether he's had difficulty joining the meeting or not, or whether he is declining to present today. However, Anne-Marie Norton is available with us, and you can unmute your phone by pressing *6.
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted.
Yep. We can hear you now, Anne.
Oh, good. Good evening, Chair and councillors and anyone else who is attending. I guess maybe that's it. My name, as you said, is Anne-Marie Norton, and I'm one of the closest neighbors to this proposed development. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening. Now, it has been mentioned a couple of times about the previous land use, and I do have a knowledge of the history of this corner, and I am concerned about the soil that's under the pavement. When O'Regan's bought the property, that was in 1986, and had it paved. Of course, the soil was sealed at that point. But for 120 years, it existed, it cycled through as ironworks, a rolling metal mill, and various foundries. So it was operated as vibrant enterprises and prosperous as companies. So if the soil is, if the asphalt is broken and the soil is dug up, it really needs to be considered by the province if that's, and I don't know what the chain of command is here, but to ask them to do some kind of an assessment. I'm also concerned that the soil might not, if it's not considered, it might be hauled, some of it might be hauled away somewhere, and then that soil would be put someplace else in the city or outside the city, and people might be exposed to that if there is indeed and could be, well, some kind of problem there. So that's the first thing I'm concerned about. I was glad to hear somebody mentioned about the mature trees. There is that border of conifers parallel to Thistle Street on the far lot of O'Regan's property, and the trees, of course, all trees in the neighborhood serve to make our neighborhood influence us in a positive way. But these trees actually work as a windbreak, and in the winter they also serve as a snow break. And I guess if you don't live or you don't experience that, they could be cut down without consideration for the age of the trees and their functionality, as well as their contribution to living here. Now, the third point has to do with the play area. The play area is too small to be used, and it's in a terrible location. You know, we talk about children being on their phones and their computers and all that too much, but if this is my understanding of looking at the plans, it's very difficult for parents coming home from work to let children go out to play to that particular lot. It's close to the traffic coming in and out on Maple Street, and it's really way too small. But at the other corner of the plan, they have the building for garbage collection, and I just think that there's something backwards here, because although it would be for garbage collection, it doesn't mean that building has to be ugly. It could be where the playground is now, and the children could be safer over in that corner because it's adjacent to the vacant lot that's next to it, where the fence and the brook runs along on the other side of the fence. So just children often get overlooked in our development in the city, and although we mentioned other places in the neighborhood for children to go, younger children can't access these without the parents being with them, and for little kids to go out, I think it would be difficult for them to go out and have to go through the parking where the tenants park on that plan, and then go to the front where it's close to the cars coming in and out. So you know, children need a little bit more consideration for how it affects them.
I believe you reached your 5-minute limit. Appreciate your input. You want to wrap up then?
Yes, the wrap up would be, I certainly can understand the property being used for housing, but I think 20 townhouses is too many for that location. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have any luck getting a hold of Mr. Bill McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the committee. No further success in contacting Mr. McLeod. However, I do note that correspondence was submitted by Mr. McLeod that is included and has been circulated to all members of the community council.
Yes, I wanted to acknowledge this correspondence as well as other correspondence have been received for this as well as other particular case. Since we have no other, is there any comments or questions for Ms. Norton before we close the public hearing? Hearing none. The opportunity now for the applicant to make an opportunity to respond to any points that were raised during the public hearing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're happy to respond to some of those comments. First one, heard concerns about the soil and some of the impacts that environmental issues that may be on the site. The provincial regulations around soil contamination and remediation and environmental assessments are pretty clear and pretty strict, and all those regulations will be followed and permits will be acquired to make sure that happens. So, I mean, as far as what is going to happen with that soil, that's something that's going to be figured out in the future at the permitting stage per provincial regulations. The next point was about the trees along the buffer there. Every effort will be made to maintain the existing vegetation, and then new vegetation will be planted if that's not able to be maintained.
If I could also point out, just on that point, the trees currently exist on on the edge of the paved parking area. It's not our intent to exceed the edge of the paved parking area where it currently is, and a lot of those trees are already well established on the edge of where the parking is located. If we don't need to move the paved edge and the trees can remain, that is the intent of the owner.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the kind of the next point around the play area. So the first about the point about being too small, it is a similar size to some of the play areas in the area. We looked at a couple different options, and as far as what would that look like and how we could configure that, and there are some other play areas in the area that are of similar size. And then the location of the play area. So we did actually look at putting the play area where the garbage enclosure currently is located, and the reason we didn't keep that there is because cars are backing up that direction if they're parking and trying to get out of the driveway. So we would rather not have vehicles backing up into the play area versus having good sight lines to that amenity space and play area. Additionally, there is a hard surfaced path and basically a sidewalk that is along the rear on the backside of those units on Thistle with a marked crosswalk there to access the play area. So you're not walking through the parking lot in a non-marked crosswalk to get to the play area.
Thank you. And just for the record, in regards to the soil conditions, if any contaminated soils with hydrocarbons are to be treated at the Enviro soil facility up by the airport, Aerotech Park. If any pyritic slate formations are found, that has to be deposited in the sanctioned area, usually in salt water of the Halifax Harbour over there by the north end container pier. So that's where those things are being currently processed. Any further comment or questions? We ask for motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Councillor.
Chair, I've got a procedural point of order. Some
right.
point of COVID trying to do this virtual.
Right.
Bill McLeod has sent me a text message. He indicated that no one has called him, so there seems to be some issue there in terms of whatever number our staff had versus the number he's at. I'm wondering if I know we've now allowed the applicant to reply, but if we can get Mr. McLeod, given the circumstances, can he still participate?
I'm open to that because we have not closed the public hearing yet.
I will put his number in the chat here, and maybe the clerk can try and reach him.
The chat's public though, Sam. You may want to just send it to the clerk.
If you could just send me an email, that might be
too late.
Already done. Oh, it's 407. Sorry. I'll email you, Simon. Oh, wait.
That's the number I had in my phone for him, but you tell me that's not the correct number.
I can just confirm I
email
have called that number and don't appear to be connecting either. Appears to be some continuing connection issues. I did call, I believe, the number initially provided by the applicant, and while I appeared to get through, did not receive a response. So I think.
Can you try the 407 combination instead?
Yep. Just tried that one now.
Oh,
so we may want to consider potentially a 5-minute. Well, we can't really break right now where we have a public hearing, I believe. So if you'll just bear with me, I'll try one more time.
My dear.
We can hear you, Austin.
We can hear you, Sam.
You can hear me telling my wife to go to dinner without me.
At least you called her dear, so that's good. Should we have some Jeopardy music going on at this point in time, Mr. Chair?
We'll let you do the singing. You know, your previous predecessor was known for the music collections.
That's right. And with the last name like Mancini and my Uncle Henry, one would assume I could carry a tune, which isn't true. I can't.
I'm sure you can spare us with your vocal talents.
That would be pretty.
Are we having any luck with Mr. McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to update, I have gotten Bill McLeod on the phone using the staff-provided number. We are just connecting right now, and I am hopeful that he will be able to join the meeting via telephone or via Zoom shortly. I will update when I next get confirmation.
Perhaps I should ask our solicitor in regards to the participation of Mr. McLeod. Did he have to be present during the full presentation to make his comments, or since he's already sent an email in or a correspondence in, he's probably seen and read the report? So just want to clarify in regards to input at a public hearing, what is eligible to be brought forward?
Yeah, he didn't have to be present for the whole thing. It's only the voting councillors that have to be present for the whole public hearing.
Thank you. If Mr. McLeod is calling in from West Lawrencetown, there may be some connectivity issues, I could say, for broadband internet connections and cell phone connections in that particular area.
Hello, Mr. Chair. This is Simon Ross Eagle again to confirm that I have given the phone number via the phone to the applicant. He does appear to be having difficulty receiving communication via email. So he now has the phone number. Sorry, I should say the speaker, and the speaker should be joining us by phone shortly. Mr. Chair, as well, while we're waiting, I just note that it is coming up 2 minutes to 8. It may be valuable for Community Council to consider a motion extending the time of the meeting, possibly to 8:30 or to 9, based on the other agenda items we have potentially.
I'll entertain a motion to extend the meeting, please.
I can move that, Mr. Chair. I would move that we extend our meeting till 9 o'clock.
Second.
Councilor Kent, any questions on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. I hope we have our next presenter already on the line waiting for us for the presentation, so we don't have another technical difficulties.
I can confirm the other speaker is on the line.
Thank you.
And I can confirm that the speaker has joined the phone now.
Mr. McLeod, if you can hear us, please hit *6 to unmute yourself, please. Mr. McLeod, you're still muted. Please hit *6 to unmute your phone.
Okay.
Mr. McLeod, I believe you're now on the line with us.
Okay, great. Thank you ever so much.
You've been holding up democracy tonight, Bill. You should be very proud of that.
I'm doing my best. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for my dalliance and being able to get on the agenda here. I didn't get the email, and therefore, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. You have 5 minutes to speak to the application of the corner of Maple and Thistle.
That's right.
And you may want to turn off your computer because I think there's a feedback. There's probably delayed process on your speaking from the phone. If you're probably listening on your laptop.
Okay.
So you may want to mute your laptop down.
I've just done that.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, David. I sent a letter yesterday in respect to this development. I should say that I own the property directly across the street, and consequently, I have a very keen interest, and I've talked to a number of the neighbors about this, just to sort of canvass around to find out, what their thoughts on this particular development were. And the sort of things that came up were overcrowding, increased traffic flow, public environmental issues, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that seems to be of some interest, parking and amenity space for children. I've reviewed the traffic study. It appears to underestimate the number of vehicles using Maple Street to access Thistle and en route to the bridge. Nor does it take into account the large number of service and emergency vehicles which are using Maple Street both during the day and evening hours. As the planning department verified the actual number of cars using Maple Street, I think that question was asked by one of the councillors. But the second part, have they factored in the continuous use of the street by emergency vehicles? Moreover, given the incline of the street, is consideration been given to the restriction of parking on both sides of the street to avoid increased congestion. Right now, I believe parking is permitted, but when during the winter in particular, when cars are trying to make it up that hill, it's pretty treacherous, and we may have some difficulties, with people trying to get to Thistle Street from off Maple, and particularly if there's people turning in and out. The other thing is, and I think this was brought up by one of the previous people that wanted to intervene, was the 20 stackhouse unit styles. Just wondering, it's going to increase the density of housing considerably. It seemed obvious that 18 parking spaces would be insufficient for 20 units, as proposed in the application. Now, also, where's overflow traffic going to go, and people visiting and so on? Where are they going to park? Are they going to park on Maple Street? Are they going to park on Thistle Street? Where are they going to park? Also, just 55 meters of common space for children. Yes, I know the parks are close, but small children in particular may need a play area that's adequate for them. And, I just sort of hate to see anything go afoul there. Now, in terms of, and this was brought up before, yes, the Dartmouth Iron Foundry was located there, was located for a long time. My father was a part owner of that, and consequently, I had the opportunity as a small child to actually walk through the refinery itself, and then around the buildings and so on. And I'm just wondering what type of, if there would be any base metal remnants or anything that would be toxic or pollutant in nature. And yes, I really think that when somebody takes the asphalt off, you might find something interesting underneath. And let's hope it's just some sort of an artifact or something like that. Now, the other thing that I just sort of question, are these owner-occupied units, or are they going to be rental properties? The projected market, when the units come up for sale. Downtown Dartmouth is somewhat congested at present, and the owners of existing properties are concerned about overbuilding and might lead to these units being undesirable for purchase and constantly be let as rental units. And we're obviously concerned that this might lead to some devaluation of our properties. Just looking at it, we're talking about a half acre of land right down in the urban core. Proposal exceeds existing guidelines, as was stated. And, I'm just wondering about whether they're not just overdoing this whole thing. 20 units. Why? Yes, 20 units seems a bit high for that particular piece of property. Now, those are my comments. I suspect the developer might have something to say about those. I know that if they're not probably addressed correctly, there will be problems later, particularly with the service vehicles, particularly with the snow conditions that we get on this very steep hill during the winter, and so on and so forth.
5 minutes has elapsed.
Okay, very good. I'll stop now. I'm not going to turn my computer on.
You can turn your computer on, or you listen on the phone, because we'll have the applicant to make any rebuttal to the comments you've raised here. So you can listen on the phone if you wish. Go.
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
would like to address those comments. Joe's going to
Yeah.
start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your comments, Mr. McLeod. I guess I'd like to let Community Council know that prior to making the development agreement application was at the time that Center Plan Package A was being drafted, and we were doing studies on what at the time Center Plan Package A contemplated for this site. That contemplation has since been adopted, and under Package A, and by the looks of things, the final version of Center Plan Package B has identified this site as an HR1 zone. An HR1 zone is a higher density residential use zone. And we had done some studies at the early stages of Package A, and it is in fact validated by the Package B that this site under those guidelines would probably see an apartment building that would include perhaps 30 to 40 units. We felt that that was inappropriate for this site, and as a result made the development agreement application to right size the development in what you're seeing today. So rather than come up with an apartment building that has interior corridors and elevators, exit stairs, and double loaded nature, we felt that this was more important to have the residential form in this development agreement application with no internal corridors, all walk-up style units that again were more in keeping with the community. So I guess I just wanted to point out that as far as density is concerned, the policy does support the density, even pre-center plan that we're presenting. And the density that is proposed by the current draft of the center plan actually allows quite a bit more. So we felt that this was a more delicate response to an unused urban site. And I would think that its outcome will actually enhance and improve the land values of the properties around the development. I'm not a real estate expert, but I can tell you that this is not intended to be for sale individually. This is a single PID. Each one of these units will be rentable. And again, it's allow for people in their communities to stay in their community and giving them alternative housing options. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for motion to close the public hearing. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by
I'll second.
Councillor Austin. I see his hand up. All right, all those in favor of close the public hearing, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, have the motion on the floor and debate, please. Councillor
I'll put it on the
Austin.
floor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just clicking here into the window so I can read it. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A, and 2, require the agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council in any other bodies as is necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Second, Mancini.
Seconded by Mancini. Debate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the two neighbors who came and presented this evening to us. I consider myself a neighbor of this as well. I'm not directly across the street, but I'm certainly down around the corner. This is very much my neighborhood. And so this site it's an interesting one, and you know it does go back quite a ways, right? You know, as this, you know, really to a different era when we put these kind of industrial commercial uses smack in the middle of neighborhoods, even when they were fairly incongruous, right? Operating a car dealership or foundry. These are the sort of uses that now we try and we push out to other places. So it was identified, I think the downtown Dartmouth plan was 2008 or 2004. I think it was 2008. So it identified this spot as an opportunity site. And so when that plan came into force, basically the council of the day and the plan that was adopted identified this spot as, yes, this is a spot that's appropriate to accommodate some more density, nothing over the top, but this is a place that's an opportunity to intensify, because this kind of paved surface parking lot is really contributing nothing to the neighborhood as it is now. So that designation was then carried forward into the center plan, and in the center plan, as the applicant touched upon, they would be able to build an apartment building on site as they could have pre-center plan, right? Up to 11 meters, so about 3 stories. So what has actually been designed for this site to me is actually, I think it is density-wise, it is in fitting with the neighborhood. We have duplexes right across the street, two of them there. I know there's many people in the neighborhood who also have basement apartments, or they're a set of flats. So it is, I think that piece of it, I'm very much satisfied with. The traffic piece has been the one, and I'm glad along the way that this was modified, because when this was first presented, and I think it was changed just prior to the public meeting, it wasn't initially a right in, right out. So that was a change that has happened along the way, and I think it's a very important one, because the proximity to that intersection could be problematic if you have left turning vehicles that are trying to get across at that spot. So the right in, right out is very important to this development, and I would very much encourage the applicant, and I will follow up with staff on this, if it goes ahead tonight, that that the design of that be robust, right? It can't be right in, right out that then some people just kind of don't follow. I don't think it has to be. I don't think it's something that people will necessarily, if it's designed well, that will be set up to fail. I basically have right in at my house on my street. For 2 hours every day, you can't make a left onto Tulip Street from Maple. So what you do, and this is what I expect most people in this development are going to do, they're going to drive up to Beach, turn right on Beach, come down, make a right on Rose, and then come around the back through there, right? I don't think people are actually going to really drive down Dr. Loney to then come up the hill. I suspect that's probably what most will do. So there will be some level of impact on the neighborhood as a result, but the number of units here, the number of cars, I don't think it's going to be all that. It'll be imperceptible, really, in the grand scheme of things, because it's not a huge development. We know from the StatsCan data that 50% of the people in District 5 are going to take transit, they're going to walk, they're going to take bikes. The other chunk are going to drive. So in a 20-unit development, I mean, that's not going to add up to a whole lot of vehicles, and it's going to be staggered and spread out. Really, where we get more traffic problems is when we get development out on the edge in Councillor Purdy, Councillor Mancini's district, where there aren't those transit options, where there aren't those biking and walking options, where you'll have the StatsCan data, it's 97, 98% of people are taking their car for their trips. So I think the traffic piece I'm satisfied with. It's just I really want to make sure, emphasize that right in, right out is really important. The contaminated site, I expect there's probably some messy stuff under the ground there. I don't expect that given the time that the foundry closed and it was converted into a car lot, that anyone dug up any contaminated soils and removed them or cleaned them up. I mean, really, they did something that actually is a recognized practice. They encapsulated it by paving it over. Well, now we're going to break into that. And so there's going to, the environmental piece is going to be important. Can I ask staff, I think we've touched on that several times tonight. What does the permitting stage from HRM look like? I mean, this enters more into the provincial realm rather than us, but what interface do we have with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. That is not something that does come through the permitting stage. I did reach out to development engineering earlier today to see if that was something that was flagged during their review when they look at the grading of the site and things. And their response was that no, that's not something that's captured during their review. Oftentimes it is something that is dealt with before they ever review the permit for the site. And so it does fall back to the applicant to do their due diligence to make sure that they are following all those provincial regulations and legislation prior to the permit being issued.
Okay, this applicant I have confidence will, given their prominent place in the community. If people have concern, like if something did go awry here, right, what is the recourse, right? If it's not HRM planning, is that a call to the Department of Environment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, I believe so. Because it does fall within the provincial regulation, then I would say that the appropriate party to be calling would be Nova Scotia Department of Environment.
Okay, well, that information there, the two callers online would now have that, and I would encourage the applicant. I'm comfortable with what's being presented as terms of a development. I would very much encourage the applicant to make sure whatever the environmental outcome of this is, that they make that well known to their neighbors, lest there be, I mean, it's been raised several times, people are going to call the department and then you're going to have the provincial inspectors. So best to be forthright about it and let the neighbors know in advance as to what actually is required there based on whatever soil sampling and due diligence they need to complete. So I'm okay with this one, just given its scale. I think it's a good fit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from any members of council? Hearing none, then I'll call for the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. I'd like to thank everyone for participating tonight for public hearing, and we'll get on with our next order of business. Correspondence has already been circulated and mentioned. We had some pieces there for the public hearing. Are there any other correspondence be acknowledged that weren't related to the public hearing? Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council. No, all correspondence has been circulated to members of Community Council and related to the two public hearings tonight.
Thank you. Any petitions to be filed tonight, members of council? Hearing none. We have a presentation scheduled. We have item 11.3.1, Love Your Lakes program. Is an update from Kelly Schneer, from the program director of Reimagining Atlantic Harbors. So Kelly, are you on the line with us?
I'm here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, I want to show you my shirt. Like the short is, short is like, all right?
Some hometown pride.
Okay, we have a presentation to come forward. Thank you very much. The floor is yours now, Kelly.
Great. As Councillor Austin mentioned, we do have an informational presentation that we did last month, and this is a formal check-in during field season. So happy to be here representing RAW 2050, which helps our local community understand shared eco history through hands-on awareness projects. Because education is generational, we have 2050, and our land-based influences are an intersection of opportunity for pollution prevention, which is within our reach, and why we're reimagining. So through the cultural narrative in Atlantic Canada, how our city centers, our harbors, can be examples for understanding of our greater watershed. So we're building public awareness that our youth can understand the center of our city is a natural ecosystem. RAW 2050 aims to promote dialogue and critical thinking of the gaps we've identified to promote scientific literacy for improving the quality of decision-making by including marginalized stewardship voices through engagement. So RAW is doing more for our shorelines through the collection of one data upload, one water story, one harbor at a time. So next slide, please. I'm asking you all tonight to look through a natural infrastructure lens. So this evening, think about funding projects in our municipality that support nature-based solutions that advance water security. While this project is a tool to capture information for which a community can act to either remediate or improve the overall health of the ecosystem, we collect data to inform actions at a grassroots level. So a strong watershed structure includes sound science. It facilitates communication and partnerships. It fosters actions that are well-planned and cost-effective. stimulates actions, and tracks results. It's important to maintain a nature-based, ecosystem-focused lens throughout this presentation. And I'd like to thank our summer facilitator, Autumn, for bringing together these slides. So lakes within our municipality are stressed. Next slide. They're stressed from land uses such as new developments or resource extraction, all of which are exacerbated by a changing climate. Healthy shorelines are vital to a healthy lake, and shorelines help filter pollutants, protect against erosion, and provide habitat for fish and wildlife. A healthy lake is good for you, your family, your property, and all your wild neighbors. This project is designed for being implemented on a lake-by-lake basis. So we work with community support for lakes. We engage community volunteers at multiple stages, and we offer progressively more volunteer commitment opportunities. Our goal is to garner observational information from residents and through field surveys to support education and awareness at a very local level. So it's an engagement opportunity for leadership, and it's a great baseline understanding for residents and the broader community members such as yourselves. Next slide. So Love Your Lakes assesses all developed and undeveloped shoreline properties against a set of best practice guidelines and generates a free report for each property, as well as a lake summary for owners' reference and the baseline understanding. Partnerships and collaboration are key to fostering the social aspects of watershed management and for the report recommendations uptake locally. Next slide. What is Love Your Lakes? It's a package project, and it's transferable to many different communities, and it encourages stewardship at the local level for healthier shorelines. And it includes robust communication materials. Next slide. So what's involved? That's a big question. It has the survey delivery at the very core, and it's something that we've spent most of June doing on Porters, hand delivering surveys to folks and asking them through materials and engagement to fill out a quick survey. And we're about halfway done the assessments of on the lake assessments, while this survey report will be really valuable to the municipality. And I just wanted you to hold that for a second. Next slide. So the Love Your Lakes program was created by the Canadian Wildlife Federation and Watersheds Canada with a mission to protect and enhance shorelines, promote lake health, and to make Canada's lakes more hospitable for wildlife and more enjoyable for us. It's through collaboration, volunteerism, in-kind contributions at the local level, not only to ground truth the delivery of the project, but to curate this and the support and educational materials of local issues and unique contexts. So that's the organizational structure of it. Next slide. So the committee enthusiastically supported the Love Your Lakes project at our presentation last month. And it's because tax-paying property owners along the shorelines and their choices as citizens that they make every day can have a great impact on these resources. So the decisions not only help maintain and improve property values, but improve water quality, naturally sustain shorelines, and restore habitat and wildlife. So we receive all these benefits while we continue to enjoy waterfront living. It's a place to rest, relax, swim, fish, and play. Next slide. So the materials that we're delivering include the Love Your Lakes Values Survey and an introduction letter, which is a really important part of the process, as I mentioned. It also begins the information gathering, where property owners can provide important details on what's most important to them about their lake. They can choose to use the enclosed survey and mail it back in the provided envelope or online at loveyourlake.ca. All you have to do is click survey to get started. So it's completely voluntary. It takes less than 5 minutes. It's multiple choice, and your personal information will not be shared. The report of the value survey is useful to the municipality because it's demonstrating stewardship community values, which can help unite lake stewardship by sharing information related to the management and protection of the water resources, where key water concerns are identified from the grassroots. So we hope everyone feels welcome to volunteer their knowledge about their lake. So our job is to help remind them, to provide testimonials, to collect stories and photos while performing the assessments. And we're attending community events and promoting the program to organizations, shoreline property owners in the area, and presenting at annual general meetings for each of the lakes that are being assessed. And so we're also engaging at this time to early for new lakes to assess in future years. Okay, so next slide. So with the shoreline assessment, lake residents may not even notice the team hard at work, but we wear safety vests as recommended by some of the Porter's Lakes residents. And our trained staff are in a canoe along the shoreline. Much of Porter's is inaccessible by motorboat. And we're looking at the properties and we're taking notes. But unless invited, we don't access anyone's property or inconvenience them at all. Nor do we take photos with people in the field of view. We encourage residents to feel free to wave hello or ask questions, as we're more than happy to talk about the program or talk about shorelines and lake health. So each property on your lake is assessed using standardized assessment protocol. But with the frequent heavy precipitation days we've experienced this summer, it's been a particularly challenging field season to get out there and to make notes in the field. Next slide. The reports are private and they're confidential. No one but the property owner will see the report. We don't publish the research photos. We only use them to validate our field findings. And that's really important to understand that we're non-regulatory, we're non-government, and we are doing it for baseline research purposes. Next slide. So each shoreline property owner is going to get a personalized PDF property report in their mailbox. With
1 minute remaining.
1 minute? I'm sorry. I thought I had half an hour, but we'll go ahead. Next slide.
10 minutes is what it was.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So these are some of our long-term program outcomes that I hope potentially we could have an information report again in the wintertime. Next slide. Visit the website. It's extremely comprehensive. It's a great one. Next slide. So this is Porter's context. It's a big lake and it's a small community. No local lake organization exists, and COVID kind of amplified what we're going through. Each household has been given a survey, and the lake itself is about 5 average lake sizes connected. And there's a really broad range of housing types, from mobile homes to multi-million-dollar dwellings, but it also includes municipal beaches, including provincial campgrounds. So there's over a dozen natural uninhabited islands, and these spaces are something that I hope to highlight tonight as an issue of concern for the municipal beach Kinap, which is a municipal asset. Next slide.
10 minutes is concluded.
Can I have 1 more minute? Is that okay?
We'll give you another minute wrap up. Okay.
Thanks. So with the Swim Guide app, Kinap has failed 50% of the time and passed 50% of the time over the last 3 years. Concerned residents or community members are wondering what other swimmable places are there, and the concern is high. There's over 3,000 people checking this app in the last month, or I'm sorry, in the last year. And it's a really valid tool to quantify interest. Next slide. So we have a Fun Fact Friday for community engagement. And I lunched on a natural island while in the field, and it's metaphorically like a kitty litter box. The small stones on the shore are very synonymous with it. And there are a large amount of duck feces that are upstream from Kinap. And if this happens on all of the 12 islands, we're looking at mass accumulation in the shallow region, which is Kinap. So these aren't private places; they are Crown land, and it's a really important integrated issue that I just hoped to share with you guys tonight. That's it. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Any questions, members of council for Kelly? Councillor Kent, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kelly. Kelly, I want to personally, as best I can through Zoom, apologize for the change in our opportunity to meet today. Just some things came up in the local community, in particular, a huge, large-scale community cleanup, of which I sort of half thought maybe it would get canceled, but it didn't. We were troopers out there in the rain, but I knew you would probably be okay as long as, because we were doing something environmentally. So my question to you is, I know that you're focusing on Porter's Lake. Do you have the capacity to take on another project, or are you taking on another project this summer? And is this something that is intended to be year after year? What I'm just trying to, knowing we're more than halfway through the summer and people are putting their attention to vacations and ramping up for hopefully a phase 5 in the fall, if nothing else, school. So I'm just not sure. I know I mentioned to you last time we were talking that I have I think a great set of lakes, Russell and Morris Lakes, that have great potential for this program, with some good environmental stewards already doing a lot, but this could be a great program. So I just want to hear from you, if I can take advantage of this moment to give me a little insight. Have we missed this year? Is it worth trying to fit in? I'm a little concerned, but maybe we can get it on the plate for next year.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Yeah, I do appreciate that very much. Connecting locally is an extremely important step. There is a very clear process, and gauging individual lakes contexts and unique opportunities are extremely important. So I would like to keep the ball rolling and make those introductions when possible. We've had a successful 3 months to date, and I would like to keep the momentum going, because a lot of the work happens off season, and to utilize the month or so we do have left of summer would be great to get into the field and to make those connections. So I welcome all councillors to do the same, to connect us to your local champions, so we can get that baseline information available to you. It's a great resource to understand the stewardship components within your districts, and to help also, part of the project can be done in the first year, and the second part can be done in the following year. And we do intend to continue the project within the HRM in 2022.
Thank you very much. I'll rebook.
Sounds great.
If there's no other questions, I have just a couple for Kelly in regards to the uptake so far on the surveys. How far is your participation level so far? And when do you anticipate try and encourage more participation on the survey?
Yeah, Councillor Hinsby, I really appreciate that question and your support of fielding questions from concerned citizens to date. We don't have stats on the survey uptake, but they'll be available next week due to vacation season upon us. I am hesitant that providing in such a large context with these 5 lakes technically merged together, and the sense of voices that have been amplified within the Porters Lake community, that survey uptake encouragement with your support wouldn't go. It would be advantageous to remind and to support and to deliver stewards who are waiting and who do want to amplify the messaging and voices to have that platform as well. So reminders are an amazing thing, and incentives are as well. So looking forward to working with you there.
To let you know, for tonight's meeting, I did post on several Porters Lake area Facebook pages that there's going to be a presentation tonight on tonight's agenda with a link to the video. Hopefully that after tonight's broadcast, we'll be able to get a more defined link for the presentation and question and answer period, so people who may have missed this live broadcast can actually review it, watch it again at their leisure. So
Yeah, I do encourage everyone to get in touch and to make the step to communicate in person as well with your neighbors, with your community members.
okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Kelly. And if you could forward that presentation to us, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Certainly, I think your support staff does have the presentation. So.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Good night.
next item.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now. Good night. Our next item on the agenda is staff report 13.1.1, case number 23401, non-substantial amendments to an existing development agreement for 249 and 251 and 257 Windmill Road in Dartmouth. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed amending development agreement as set out in attachment A of the June 8th, 2021 report to allow a non-substantive amendment to an existing development agreement extending the commencement and completion dates for the development.
Your seconder, please. Second, Councillor Kent.
Second.
Any questions or debate on the motion? Councillor Austin?
Just the notice of motion, Mr. Chair. As far as I understand, it will come back.
Okay, so we'll move that forward. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Item of business is item 13.1.2, case number 23609, and non-substantive amendments to an existing development agreement for Evergreen Drive in Cole Harbour. I ask Councillor Purdy to move this, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed amending development agreement as set out in attachment A of the June 10th, 2021 report to allow a non-substantive amendment to the existing development agreement extending the commencement date for the building construction.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kent. Any questions on the motion?
No, same as the last one. It's a notice of motion. I think we'll have debate next month.
Okay, thank you. Any, hearing no more? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Motion carried. Next item of business, we have no members of the community council bringing any motions forward. Any in-camera items? None. There were no added items. Are there any notices of motion by any members of committee council? Hearing none. Public participation. Did we have anybody signed up in time for tonight's public participation assignment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, there were no registered speakers for public participation.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, our next meeting is scheduled for September the 2nd. Hearing no other business, may I take a motion to adjourn, please?
I so move.
So moved by Councillor Purdy. Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.
Good night. Good to see you all. Enjoy some more sunny